Hey, it's Maja, and in this video I'm reviewing a book, The Prophet by Robert Johns Jr. that came out on January the 5th in 2021. The Prophets by Robert Johns Jr. is an adult historical novel that is following Sam and Isaiah, two men that are in a relationship on a Halifax plantation in Mississippi in the early 19th century. There are two slaves there, and they're also inseparable but separated from every other slave because A, they're working at a barn together, and B, because they're in a relationship and other people are avoiding them because of that. So in this book we are getting perspectives not just from Isaiah and Samuel, but also from all of the characters that appear in the book. Every character has a point of view chapters, even the white people as well. So this is a hard story about racism and slavery, but also about feminism, gender roles, sexuality, and even death and life in the kind of metaphysical way. And this is also discussing religion as well, nicely contrasting the Christianity and the African folk religion. So before we get to the review, the trigger warnings for this book are non-consensual sex, graphic violence, death, torture, slavery, racism, cursing. I think whatever you can imagine, it is in this book. But with that out of the way, let's step into the review. So first I will start with my general thoughts on the book, and then we'll go on to the kinds or the negative things that I disliked about the book, and then the pros or the positive things that I liked about the book. And I will wrap up this review by my rating and the end thoughts of the book at the end of the video. So starting with the general thoughts, this book definitely offers the perspective or the depiction of the horrors of slavery. I didn't even have idea of all the horrors that happened in our history, in the humankind history that we did until reading this book, because all of the other things that I've watched or read were, it turns out, washed out versions. So this book definitely deals with the horrors of slavery, but it also deals with feminism. We have so many feminist thoughts. They're really radical, I think. Then we have also the gender roles, the discussions about gender, how people should basically choose their own gender, either woman or man or all or free. Free is like not connected to any gender. So these four boxes, we should all be able to choose which one we feel we are. There's discussion about that. There's discussion about sexual identity. Besides that, we also have this nice contrast between the two religions, the Christianity and the African folk religion, where we see how they interact. Another thing I liked is that the characters were not lovable, at least not all of them. They were actually very, very horrible people, especially the white people, but the chapters would be written, the perspectives would be written in such a way that you could definitely understand intellectually why they do what they're doing. However, the perspectives of the black characters were just so hard to read. I think this book is such a good overview of human psyche and the study of the character, basically, when this character is under slavery, like not free, and what can a person do like in this situation? There is no bright light at the end of the tunnel. There is discussions of slaves running away, stuff like that, but really, where would you go? We could see these people just having zero hope. And then we have Isaiah and Samuel, who were the beacons of hope in a hopeless land. However, the things that I didn't like was that the plot wasn't really there. We didn't really have a plot in this book. It was definitely primarily a study of characters, and so the plot was really slow, and what slowed it down even more was the fact that the prose was very beautiful. I liked it, but it was so slow, and at times I felt it was kind of overwritten. Even some metaphors were really overdrawn and prolonged. So this is the thing that I didn't like. Now I'll just get into some of the cons or the negative things that I disliked about the book. There's not a lot, so I'll just quickly go through that before getting into the positive things about the book. So as I already said, the number one and the only thing negative about the book is that it was just too slow for my taste. And this was due to two reasons. First of being the prose was very overwritten to the point of obscurity at some times. There were some metaphors that were so implicit and unexplained, and they just went on and on and on, and I would just forget what the point even was, what the idea at the beginning of the paragraph, at the beginning of the page was. So I would just read, and I would be like, I have no idea what's happening. This feels like some kind of slam poetry, bad slam poetry or something. So this brings me to the second reason why the plot was so slow. There was no plot. So with this slow writing, introspective writing that sometimes really felt overwritten to me, when we add the fact that this book doesn't really center on the plot, but on the characters, it was really hard for me to focus sometimes on the book. It was hard for me to get through some of the passages and the chapters, because while I loved the character study in this book, I also felt dread from, the slowness. I can't. I like slow books, but this was really even too slow for me. And another reason for this is that some of the metaphors were so stretched and prolonged. I think that metaphors, at least in my opinion, are more effective if they're shorter. Just this metaphor like be extended, expanded, it would just get a life of its own, a little baby metaphors of its own. So these were all of the things that I disliked about the book. Like that's not a lot. Like it was a slower book, but that's not really the point. So the first thing that I really liked in this book was the characters. This book, as I already mentioned, is definitely a character study because it most focuses on the characters, on their introspections, on their feelings and thoughts, especially the Black characters who were kept as slaves. They can't be legally free even if they escaped. Like if you're in prison, you know that, okay, maybe I escaped, maybe I, find a new life somewhere. In here on the plantation, everything was dark. And the perspective, the insight we got into these characters, the Isaiah and Samuel, the Maggie was one of my favorite characters. I liked her very, very much. Even Amos, who I disliked, I understood where he was coming from. As I said, every character in this book gets a point of view chapter. This was done incredibly because every chapter feels like a different short story in a way and a different voice. It was hard sometimes to read all of the torture and death and violence in this book, but the chapters, the perspectives of the characters explain this violence so well that intellectually you actually start to understand why, although I didn't agree with why some things happened, but I understood it. And I think this is definitely a talent of the writer, of the author, to offer such a gruesome story, and then in the end you feel like you do understand why people who were evil. So now I'll go on to the plot a bit. So we have this relationship between Isaiah and Samuel. The two of them are working in the barn, so they're always together the whole day. They sleep there, they tend to the animals, and they have this type of connection. This book is definitely interwoven with magical realism elements because they're presented as this holy symbol of hope, symbol of the truth, basically the truth at the center of it all. So when we hear perspectives of other characters, all of them feel this truth about themselves from Isaiah and Samuel. And then we also have, which I didn't think would come towards the end of the book, no spoilers, but white people's perspectives. And I didn't know it would come, but reading from their perspectives was just horrible because they're such horrible people. Like obviously, like they the master who is working at the plantation, his wife is really interesting because she's racist. She does see Black people as like animals, but also she does have this discussion about feminism and how she's also trapped in this place. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not sympathizing with her because, as I said, like every white character is a piece of shit in this one, and I think that's realistic. That's another thing that I really liked in this book, but there was no sugarcoating anything. Like they kept people captive. That's unforgivable. But other characters, they were all in the gray area. For example, Maggie is my favorite character for sure, and I really liked that. I really liked this character study into the minds of people who are trapped and dealt with like animals. This was really perfect. And I know I wanted to kind of talk about the plot. I'm back on the characters again. As I said, there's not much of the plot, any plots to really talk about, except the characters and the ideas presented in this book. The only thing that I can say about the plot is that it really sometimes reminded me of the Homegoing, because we got to see some of the scenes in an African village from the perspective of the African village's king, and then we also got to see some of the perspectives on the boat from Africa to America. This also ties in with the idea of time being circular, because this is also one of the central themes in this book as well, the life and death and how everything repeats. So everything that happened will happen, everything that will happen has already happened. You know, some type of metaphysical ideas at the center of it all as well. This is why we see the African village when the white slave traders came and the boat travel journey from Africa to America as well. We don't have the plot, some fast-paced fiction plot, but we have these small moments that keep us going while we are learning about the characters and while these ideas about feminism, gender, sexuality, religion, life and death are presented to us. As for the writing, I really liked it. I really liked how poetic it was. As I said, after a while it became kind of tiring, because I felt like some of the parts were overwritten and maybe a bit too cramped with metaphors. There were some of the parts of the book that were really implicit, so you could easily miss them, but there were major plot points. But I did like how poetic it was. There were so many quotable paragraphs, even like pages, not even sentences. I can't say sentences because I highlighted, I was reading on my e-reader and I highlighted the whole pages of text. This is how beautiful the writing is at times. So for writing, this is all I have to say. It was really beautiful. In the end, a bit overwritten, but still, I will remember it really, really fondly. Ultimately, I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a beautiful overview and introduction, or a study of captivity and slavery and people who are held captive. So that's it, and I would like to hear what you have to say about this book. Have you read it? Do you like it? What did you like, dislike? Please tell me down in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!